Hello, this is Bill Webb, aka Billy Indiana. Today I'm going to do a 3x3x3 review for Sleeping Gods by Ryan Laukat and Red Raven Games. This one was recently fulfilled as a Kickstarter, and my wife and I have been playing it a lot the last week or so. I want to talk to you about three things that we really like about this game. Three things that either we didn't care for or we could see other players struggling with or not enjoying. And then giving you three other games that we recommend. Either Sleeping Gods, if you like that, you'll like those other three games potentially, or if you like those other three games, then you would probably like Sleeping Gods. So let's get this one to the table. The first thing we really like about Sleeping Gods is you get to explore this beautiful, mythical, massive world. It comes with this book of maps, and the maps are just gorgeous. The art and the components in this, as is typical of Red Raven Games and Ryan Laukat's art, very beautiful. And you just can go and go and go. There's seemingly no end to the replayability of this game. You can explore to your heart's content. The storyline just keeps developing, and so you can spend as much time in this world as you want, and that freeness, that ability to explore, and the fact that the world is beautiful, the characters are interesting. There's all these mythical storylines that are going on, these fantastical beasts that you have to encounter. Just a great adventure, and we love that exploration, that adventure, and how broad and big this beautiful world is. So that's our first thing that we love about Sleeping Gods. The second thing we really like about Sleeping Gods is the combat system. It's just a really unique system. We have this nice little combat board that comes with the Kickstarter. I can't remember if it was an add-on or if it came with it, but it's a two-sided combat board, and it's got these little outlines so you can see where you lay down the enemy cards. And there are just dozens and dozens of these enemy cards. They all have the same back, but then they've got different art on the front, and I can show you some under the close-up camera. All right, so let me give you a quick explanation of how combat works, since it's one of our favorite features of the game. When you come into combat against some different creatures, you're going to put them on the table. We have this combat board, which I mentioned, and I just randomly picked two bad guys, two monsters. So we got the Drying Dead and we got the Myth and Brute. And you put them side by side, and that's important. And you can see down here they've got these grids. The goal to defeat them is to cover up the hearts on their grids. But there are other symbols on the grids that make a difference as well during the combat. And then this is one of our characters that I'll demonstrate a quick attack with. And then up here you can see that when they counterattack, this Drying Dead is going to do 2 damage, and you have to have an accuracy of 7 before you can even get a hit on the Drying Dead. For the Myth and Brute, he's going to do 3 damage on his counterattack, and you have to have an accuracy of 6 before you make contact. So if we look at Raphael has an accuracy of 3. And so if you have a weapon, so maybe Raphael has a rapier. If he does, then he would add 3 and he would have greater accuracy. He would also add combat strength or attack strength. So these weapons can be pretty valuable. But whether you have a weapon or not, when you make the attack, you look at their accuracy value. So Raphael has a 3, and then you draw an ability card, which is now used as a fate card. So these abilities can be used and activated onto different characters. So I have one here activated on Raphael, but you flip them over during combat and you look at this number in the top corner and it helps you know your fate. So if we add that 5 number in the top corner to this 3 on the character for Raphael, that means he has an accuracy of on this attack. And when you say you're making an attack, you put a little combat cube on here. So we're making an attack, and we took this 3 and this 5. He's got an accuracy of 8. So let's say we chose to attack the Drying Dead, and you do have to declare which monster you're attacking before you flip over the fate card. So we're going to attack the Drying Dead. We flipped over the fate card. We've got 8, which supersedes the 7. You have to have 7 or greater, so we're good there. We do get a hit. And then we look at the damage we can do. So here, let's say we've got a damage of 2. Okay, now we could discard this strength card to add another damage. We could also pay command tokens to add another damage. And so let's say we had 2 command tokens that we could play to add a 3rd damage. All right, so we made our hit because we had enough accuracy. Now we're going to add 3 damage to the Drying Dead. So this symbol here that's got a 1 and like a flaming strike symbol here if I don't cover that up when the Drying Dead attacks, he's not only going to attack for 2, he's also going to add this one and he would attack me for 3. So I definitely want to cover that one up. Now, one thing that's cool about this combat is in the midst of combat, you can do splash damage, like if I were using the rapier, for instance. Perhaps I swung at the Drying Dead and I actually got the Drying Dead's arms, but I also got a little bit of the Myth and Brute arm. That's sort of thematically, I think, how it fits together. So I could put one of them here because it's adjacent, and you can only move right and left, up and down. You can't move diagonal. So there's my adjacent splash damage. Now for the last one, I could go to the legs here. I could go to the body here. I could go up to one of the blank spaces, which don't really help me too much, but I can't go diagonal. So for my third one, let's just say I decided I'd try to take out the legs. So there's my attack of 3 against the Drying Dead and did a little splash attack onto the Myth and Brute in the process. So now it's his turn to counterattack. So because I covered this one up, he's only going to have a counterattack of 2, which means Raphael is going to suffer 2 damage. Now, you may have noticed these other little symbols on here. Right beside this one, there's a little diamond. And there's these synergy tokens, which also have a diamond on it. So whenever you cover up a diamond square in your attack, like I did here, you can pass this synergy token to another character in your team. And so when my wife and I are playing, since I covered that up, I could pass this to my wife and she could put it onto one of her characters. And so when it's her turn and she places a combat cube on the player that she's going to attack with, she would have a block of 2 for the counterattack. Here for Raphael, he has a block of 0 normally, and so he couldn't block either of these damage from the Drying Dead. But this would give a block of 2 to whoever my wife chose to attack with next. And there's 4 of these cubes for combat. Once all 4 cubes are spent, and so it'd be like Raphael goes for 1, one of Janelle's characters, my wife's characters goes for 1, I go for 1. I could use Raphael again, or I could choose a different character and then back to my wife. Once all 4 combat cubes are spent, and we've finished the round, then there's going to be end of round effects. And so this little hourglass here comes up on end of round effect. And at the end of round, you go enemy by enemy and you suffer the damage. So if this was still the way it was at the end of the round, we would choose to suffer 2 damage on one of our characters. And then because this is an end of round situation, it means that we would regenerate 1 injury, and it's because it's not covered, we would regenerate the Drying Dead by 1, so we would take 1 off at the end of the round. So you have to be strategic about where you do the damage. You can only move orthogonally. You want to try to potentially attack when you've got a character that has a larger value for accuracy. You want to try to maybe attack the character enemy who has a larger accuracy requirement. And if yours, like a lot of them only have a 1 or some of them only have a 0 or 2, then you may want to try to go for the smaller Myth and Brute, because unless you draw a big enough card, and these go from 1 to 6, so unless you draw a big enough card, you might not hit at all. And if you don't hit at all, you only do 1 damage unless you have a special ability. There are some ability cards that allow you to do additional damage even when you miss. So hopefully that makes sense for the combat and explains a little bit about what is so unique about it. I've played a lot of games where you're doing damage and you're tracking damage, and I've played a lot of games where the different characters have different abilities, but I've never seen this kind of arrangement where you're actually tracking the damage in this grid kind of a shape. I've never seen this sort of end of round. Now, maybe some of you have. I'm fairly new, only a couple of years into this gaming hobby, but just a lot of unique features that I found really intriguing in this combat system, and that's why it's the second thing we really love about Sleeping Gods. The third thing we really love about the Sleeping Gods game is the extensive narrative. We love the storytelling, we love experiencing those stories, and there's just so much. We also got Mac's journal in the Kickstarter, and I won't show a lot of it, but it's because I don't want to spoil anything, but there's just some really cool pictures and narrative and maps, and Mac is one of the characters in the story, and so you get a little bit more knowledge about what's going on here from Mac's journal. But in every version, there's this 170-page booklet, and again, I'm not going to show you anything to spoil, but there's just narrative after narrative of 170-some pages. And so you get storyline after storyline after storyline, and the map book itself is was almost 20 different pages of pictures. Yeah, 19 pages of maps, and so or 19 map pages. And so you've got all those maps to explore, and all of them come with stories, and the stories come from this book. And that's not even including the Tides of Ruin expansion that we got with the Kickstarter, or the Dungeon expansion that also came with the Kickstarter. So there's just an extensive amount of narrative, and we really like narrative-driven stories or narrative-driven games. So that is one thing that we love about Sleeping Gods, the third thing of our top 3. Now let's talk about 3 things that either we don't care for too much, or we could see other players maybe not loving. The first one is there's kind of an uphill battle when you're getting started. There's a steep learning curve. There are a lot of different kinds of cards. Even when I was just trying to organize what's in the box, trying to figure out what all the cards are. There's skill cards, ability cards, adventure cards, quest cards, enemy cards, event cards. And then there's a lot of different terminology that you have to get familiar with, like the combat cubes versus the command tokens versus the resources versus the skill tokens. And there's just all these different things you're trying to piece together, lots of bits and parts. And so there is a bit of a steep learning curve. Now, we did really appreciate the tutorial. It kind of taught you how to do combat. It kind of taught you how to move around the map. It was helpful, but after we completed the tutorial, we still found ourselves referring back to the rule book pretty frequently for the first couple of hours. Well, what did that term mean? Which card is that again? There's just quite a bit to learn at the beginning. But once you get past that learning curve and you understand what all the terms mean, it starts to pick up pace and feel more smooth, and it doesn't feel quite so choppy. But it did feel a little bit slow and choppy the first couple hours when we were getting used to everything and really trying to absorb all the details. I think it's definitely worth it, but I could see some people being kind of turned off by that, as you do have to kind of work through that to get to the point where it starts feeling rhythmic. The second thing that we can see that some people might be turned off by is that even on normal mode, it's pretty difficult to get things moving or feel like you're getting moving. You tend to take quite a bit of damage in combat. It's hard to find resources. It's hard to have enough experience points to really advance your characters. And so even in normal mode, it feels a little bit like a slog at the beginning, trying to, how can we upgrade our characters? How can we get better? It takes some time. And if you're patient, you don't mind investing that time. If you're just enjoying the ride, then that's fine. But if you feel like you want to have it be a little bit more high paced and be able to make progress quicker, then Ryan Laukat has put out an easy mode, and it isn't actually part of the Kickstarter information, but there's an errata and other information that he's posted online that you can look at where he explains an easy mode that is now the official easy mode. I'm sure it'll come out in future editions, and it gives you more to start with, so you don't feel like it's quite so difficult to build up your characters and not quite so difficult to overcome combat early on. So it gives you kind of a head start. And then also when you finish a campaign, or if your players all lose all their health, the reset strategy for that also is a bit easier if you use easy mode. Now there's also brutal mode. So if you want it to be more aggressive, you can go that route. I can't ever imagine playing it on brutal mode. We've only played on normal. I think we might try easy mode next time we do a campaign just to see how that feels different. But if you feel like you want a more high-paced ability to advance your characters, easy mode may be the route. And since that's not necessarily included in the original rulebook, that could maybe, if people don't know about it, that may turn them off if they start on normal mode and just feel like they can't get it going. The third thing that we could see some people not enjoying about this game is that there's kind of no end. I mean, there are end stories. So when you get to an end of a campaign, there's an ending. And based on what you've discovered, the ending is different. But in a sense, it's such a huge, massive world. So it's kind of a counterpoint to one of our pros. If you're a player that really likes the game to have a clear start and finish and a clear we won, we lost, or someone won, someone lost, that may feel a little bit lacking in this game because it is so open-ended. So it's not something actually that we care about or that bothers us, but I could see if players don't like that open-endedness, if they want a little bit more direction, if they want to have a little bit clearer goals to try to strive for, and they want a clear ending, that may be something that this game would turn them off from, because it is very open-ended and you could play it for hours and hours and hours. And experience a bunch of little mini endings, but there's not like just this big climactic ending, at least not that I'm aware of. I mean, we've only played several hours, so we'll have to see what comes up after we've achieved some more campaigns, but that may feel a little bit like, well, I can't just play the game and end it. That may turn off some players. So now let's talk about some games that we would recommend. If you like Sleeping Gods, you might like these other games, or if you like these other games, you may like Sleeping Gods because of some similarities between them. So the first one is just some obvious connections. if you've played other Ryan Laukat games, or if you find yourself liking Sleeping Gods, Above and Below and Near and Far are two other Ryan Laukat games that have this narrative. They both come with books. In Above and Below, you're going down underneath the ground and exploring these caves and caverns. In Near and Far, you're traveling on these maps, and kind of not as much maps as what you see here in Sleeping Gods, but kind of like that. You're flipping through different parts of the maps and you're exploring different places, and definitely lots of narrative in these games. And so if you like that part about Sleeping Gods, you'll probably like Above and Below and Near and Far. Although I would say the narrative of Sleeping Gods far surpasses the amount of narrative you'd experience in these two games. Another game that you might like, if you like Sleeping Gods or vice versa, is Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth. Now, Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth, the narrative more comes through the app. And so as you're playing, you're developing the map, you're putting out new parts of the map as you explore different places. And in the app, it's telling you the story as you go. And so it is also very story-driven. You're also fighting enemies and trying to survive. You're taking on damage. You're developing your characters and advancing their skills and abilities. So there's a lot of common themes there, but it doesn't have that book of story. It's more through the app. But one that I see a lot of connections with between the style of game with Sleeping Gods and the style of game in Journeys in Middle-earth. Another one we think you might enjoy if you enjoy Sleeping Gods is Seventh Continent. Now, this is actually the expansion, What Goes Up Must Come Down, I think it's what it's called, and it's by Serious Pulp. And in this game, instead of having a book of maps, you're creating the map by flipping over cards. And then on the cards, there's little bits of narrative as well to tell you what's happening as you're exploring this series of islands and trying to uncover the reasons for the curses that you're experiencing. So it has that really open-ended sandbox kind of a feel to it, but it's a little different in terms of you're building the map as you go instead of having a book of maps, and the narrative is just in the cards that you flip over. So not quite as fleshed out on the narrative side of things, but definitely a very exploration-driven game and one that we really enjoy. So you might want to try out Seventh Continent. Now I'm going to give you a bonus one. This is another game that I think if you like Sleeping Gods, you may also really enjoy, Forgotten Waters. And Forgotten Waters is a game that does have a book. It's not so much a book of maps, but a book of locations and activities or actions. And so it's a little bit different that way. But you also have your characters, and you're also developing different abilities and opportunities for your characters as you go. And it also has an app-driven story with great voice acting to tell you the storyline. It's hilarious. It's got a lot of different campaigns that you can go through. And so this is another one where it's very story-driven, but you're still fighting off bad guys. You're still trying to accomplish these different adventures. And so Forgotten Waters by Plaid Hat Games is another one that we would recommend. If you like Sleeping Gods, I think you'd probably like Forgotten Waters or vice versa as well. So those are the three things we really love about Sleeping Gods. Three things that we either didn't care for or could see other board game enthusiasts not appreciating. And then also, actually 5 other games that we would recommend that have some similar feels to Sleeping Gods. So hopefully this video was helpful for you and informative. If it was, I'd love it if you'd click on the like button down below. It'd be terrific if you would also choose to subscribe to the channel. If you want to get notifications for future videos, click on that bell icon. And if you've played Sleeping Gods, I'd love to see in the comments down below what you like or don't like. What were your favorite things or the things you didn't care for about Sleeping Gods? Or any of the other games we've mentioned, or other games you think are similar that you would recommend if you like Sleeping Gods. I'd love to read about it in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. This is Billy, Indiana, signing off.